Hello and welcome to the podcast. This is Ron's Amazing Stories, where we play tales to take you away from today.
Ron, what do you have for us blokes today?
Well, thank you for asking, British guy. On the show today, we have another high-rise story from Herman. A father-in-law sends a message from the grave, and we have a cryptid sighting at Pleasant Island. We continue the Philip K. Dick story, second variety, and throw in some special OTR commercials from the past.
Sounds splendid. What's up first?
Well, before we do any of that, we do have a 5-minute mystery.
Cool, man!
Another 5-minute mystery.
This 5-minute mystery is being brought to you by the...
Pardon me, but would you mind if I moderated this mystery, Ron?
Sure. Go ahead, British guy.
This 5-minute mystery is being brought to you by... That would have been nice to know.
Doctor, folks, one side.
Doctor, I'm Mike Patterson. It's my father. Is he all right?
We'll see, Mike. Where's the car?
Just kept going after he got hit. He's all right, isn't he?
I'm afraid not, Mike. Your father is dead.
But, Mr. Floyd, how can the insurance company be so heartless?
Now, don't get me wrong, Mr. Patterson. You'll get the money in time, just as soon as I've heard the story from you and Dr. Warren.
And time is not good enough. I don't even have money to bury him decently.
I'll be frank with you, Patterson. That's one of the reasons I've been asked to investigate this.
You don't mean to say
Now,
that...
don't get upset. Just tell me the story as it happened. You'll probably get the money tonight. Let's begin with you, Dr. Warren.
Well, there's nothing much I can tell you, Mr.
Please,
Floyd.
Doctor, whatever you can.
Mike's father was a man of about 65. His left leg was missing.
That happened in a railroad crash. It was years ago.
He seems to have used a single crutch to help him, judging from the callus on his hand.
Is that correct, Mike?
Yes, practically all the time.
Where did the automobile hit him, Dr. Warren?
Mainly on the right side, from the look of things. That's where the worst damage was done.
All right. Mr. Patterson, suppose you tell me what you know about it.
Well, we were walking north, facing the traffic on the highway.
And the car that hit him was going south.
That's right. I particularly noticed the license plate as it approached. It was a Florida car, maybe heading home.
What make?
I don't know, but it was from Florida. I was helping my dad along, as I always did when he walked on the highway. And this car came along at a terrific speed and swerved towards us. I tried to pull my father off the road, but he couldn't move fast enough. The car hit him with a sickening thud and jerked him away from me. That's all I can tell you.
Well, I've got the whole story now, I think, for my report. I want to thank you, both of you. This will facilitate action.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. I suppose that means that I can get the money soon.
Not exactly. That means that you'll go to the electric chair for the murder of your father.
Why did Mr. Floyd charge Mike Patterson with murder? See if you can find the two flaws in his story. In a moment, you'll hear Mr. Floyd explain. But first...
Okay, we have lots of information, but no context. The narrator said that there are 2 clues. I think that the car itself may have something to do with it, but I am hornswoggled as to what the other one might be. Let's see what we missed.
And now, let's see if your observation is as keen as Mr. Floyd's.
Let me go, I tell you. You can't prove a thing.
Mr. Floyd, why did you accuse Mike of murdering his father? Was it simply because he's beneficiary?
No, Doctor. There are 2 things wrong with this story. First, he said his father was hit by a car with Florida license plates in front. Florida hasn't had front license plates in years. But more important, Mike said he was helping his father. Now, if a man's left leg is off, he uses a crutch on that side and is helped on the right side. And if they were facing traffic, Mike would have been on the inside and would have been hit by the car. We suspected what happened when we saw blood on Mike's own car, but now we know.
Okay, there were 3 clues and none were explained very well. I can't solve a murder without the facts, and that is a fact, Jack. Ron, I am leaving now.
Well, okay then. But I think this 5-minute mystery was brought to you by the lack of facts, Jack. I wanted to give you a UFO update. For the last 2 weeks, I've been asking for your stories. So far, 2 of you have responded. Scott Wilson from Houston, Texas, has sent in his story, which is both a reflection on the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind and his personal encounter. Barbara Collins has sent in an orb experience that she had in, you guessed it, New Mexico. My plan? Well, I need to collect a few more stories and lock down a UFO expert to comment on them. I've not selected or contacted anyone on this yet, but I have 2 candidates on the wish list. Micah Hanks, who is an author, podcaster, and researcher, also UFO researcher, podcaster, author, and TV personality, Ryan Sprague. Ryan just completed a show for the WB revisiting Roswell. I will keep you posted on my progress for this special podcast, but remember, I do need more of your stories. If you have any suggestions for a UFO expert, I'd like to know that too. Anything you do will help me out. Now, we've been airing commercials for our sponsor, Gladys Goodies, for a while now. Did you know that you can help the podcast out by buying your dog treats at Gladys Goodies and get yourself a 20% discount? That's right, head to GladysGoodies.com, use the promo code RONS, that's RONS, and you'll be glad you did. Thank you, Gladys.
I'm Gladdy, the dachshund, the face of Gladys Goodies. Are you worried about your pet's health? My parents were too, especially since I developed pancreatitis. They couldn't find any treats I could eat, so they made some. Our natural treats are healthy for all dogs, with and without health issues. We have lots of delicious flavors like chicken, turkey, salmon, sweet potato, beef, and more. With our homemade treats, you won't worry about the contents because they have no chemicals, fillers, or bad ingredients. Go to GladysGoodies.com now to get your fur friend a bag. And pick them up some swag while you're there. You'll be glad you did. Remember, we have the treats and swag to make their tails wag. Again, that's GladysGoodies.com. Again, that's GladysGoodies.com.
And don't you forget to use your promo code RONS, that's RONS, to get your 20% discount. And now, here are your stories.
These are your stories, sent by you, for you.
We start our stories today with one from Herman Weaver of Delaware. You might know that name because he sent in a story 2 weeks ago in episode number 371 about his first day working the great high-rises of New York City in the 1950s. We learned what a crazy job he had in those days, and on that first day, he was walking a wheelbarrow on a 6-inch wide beam, and he survived. But what about his second day? Well, Here is that story written by me and approved by Herman. We call it The Sweeper. The next day I went to work again. When I came up to the place, I found that I had my own little cubby with my name on it. I was told the day before that I could store my personal gear and that I would receive my daily assignments there. In my cubby, I found a brand new hard hat, again with my name on it, and a note which read, "Report to Mickey on 8 for sweeper training." Excited to be closer to the ground, I headed for the elevator. Also, I had met Mickey the first day, so I already knew who to look for. I stepped on the rickety platform and realized that I had no idea how to operate the thing. I looked around to ask someone for help, but no one was about. There was a notebook attached to a chain. I grabbed it and read the title. Shuttle Box Operation. Bingo, I thought, and I opened the book. It was all handwritten, but the instructions were clear enough. The first words, and I'm not making this up, were, "There's nothing to worry about. Close the gate." I did and followed the instructions step by step. I had a shaky time stopping it, but in the end I found myself on the 8th floor. I stepped off the elevator, pressed the recall button, as per instructions, and off it went on its merry clinking and clanking way. I was very happy to see flooring, no sign of steel girders anywhere, and I thought for sure that this was going to be an easy day. I wandered around until I found Mickey. "Hey, kid, I see you survived." He looked me up and down and continued, "Do you know what a broom is?" Of course I knew, but my dad had always taught me that to give a smart-off answer is always the wrong one, so I simply said, "Yes, sir." "Today, you learn how to use one on the high end of things," he replied and giggled. I had no idea what that meant, but I knew I wasn't going to like it. He walked me over to a small area where tools and other items were kept and handed me a contraption that looked like a cross between a broom and a Brillo pad. He went on to tell me that a sweeper's job is to make sure the girders are clear. "Kid," he said, "we do what we can to be safe around here. One of the most important things is to keep the girders clear of any debris or liquids. Your job today is sweep and clean. Anyone who falls today is on you." He handed me a large leather belt. On one side of it, it had a pouch which was loaded with various solvents and rags. On the other side, it had a steel cable with a clip on the end. I understood immediately that this was to clip in for safety. I noticed the day before that cables had been strung along the girders, and that while people were working, they would stop and clip themselves in. I did wonder briefly why I was not given a belt yesterday. Mickey said, "Head on up to 22 and get to work." Back to the girders. My heart sank just a bit, and again I briefly wondered why I didn't find work back on Mother Earth. As it turns out, this was not too bad of a job. I clipped myself in and walked the girders with a bit more confidence. I swept and cleaned throughout the morning with no problems. However, after lunch I went back in and had just clipped myself in when my whole world began to shake apart. The entire building seemed to wave back and forth, and my head swimmed. I fell off the girder and began my descent. They say your life flashes before your eyes when you're about to die. I guess there was no time for that, because as fast as it started, the fall stopped. I was now dangling 22 floors up, hanging from my belt. One thing I didn't mention was that these cables are at a slight downward angle. I guess you can probably guess what happened next. I began to slide, and as I did, I picked up speed. There was nothing I could do but hang on for the ride and hope that my belt held. It did, and I finally stopped after slamming into what would someday, soon, be a wall. I hung there for over an hour until Mickey came to free me. That was the end of day 2 of my instruction, steelworking in the sky. Herman Weaver, Newcastle, Delaware. When I heard this story from Herman, I was laughing. But in reality, I'm not sure I would be able to handle the situation as well as he did. I asked Herman, why did the building shake? He said that when the wind comes up, a little movement down below translates to a lot up above. Things do get better as concrete is poured. Crazy stuff. My thanks to Herman. We have one more story from him, which I will share with you soon. Thank you, Herman. Our next story is a short one from Noah Simpson from North Carolina. Noah writes, Hey Ron, I have a short story of something that happened to me a couple weeks ago. I was hiking out at Pleasant Island, which is a favorite spot for locals and visitors alike. This time of year it's pretty quiet, and the bad weather we've had have kept most folks away. It was a 19-degree day, but the sun was out. I got to the high point on the trail and was looking out over the ocean. At first, I thought I was seeing a UFO, but then I clearly saw wings flapping. The problem was that at this distance, I should not have been able to make out that kind of detail. I reached for my field glasses and camera, but by the time I got them out, it was gone. Ron, this thing had to have been massive for me to make out any kind of detail. I have no proof to offer, only my word that this happened. By the way, it had to be at least 5 to 10 miles away from me. Noah Simpson, North Carolina. Well, Noah, I hike the Columbia Gorge all the time and spot eagles and other birds. I know exactly what you mean. An eagle can be a pretty big bird, but at 5 miles, I'm sure you couldn't make out much with the naked eye. Thank you for your story. That is pretty amazing. Our last story is also a short one, and it comes from returning listener Sharon K from Phoenix, Arizona. You might remember Sharon's funny story called Backyard UFO from episode number 339. It is one of the best comic tales we've ever had on the show. Sharon writes, Hello, Ron. I'm back with another story for you. As you know, my husband and I like our humor, but this time our story is, well, just a head-scratcher. My father-in-law, Jeremy, had just passed away at the age of 96. He lived a good life and was loved by all. A few days before he passed, I was sitting with him talking about things in general, and somehow we got to chatting about the afterlife. He said that when he passes, he would be sure to get me a message somehow to let me know that he was okay. So I said, Okay, but how will I know it's you? He said, What's your favorite color? I thought about it for a moment and decided to say pink. But in truth, my favorite color has always been blue. About a week later, I was thinking about that conversation. The funeral was going to be that weekend, and I wondered if I would hear from my father-in-law. I had not seen anything pink around, and I had been watching. Just then the doorbell rang, and there was a small boy there holding a bouquet of blue flowers. He smiled and handed them to me and said that his mom wanted me to have them for the funeral. I thanked him for the gift and asked him to thank his mom. I took the flowers inside and started to put them in the vase when I had to do a double take. Right there, as plain as day, in the middle of these blue flowers was one pink one. It was the prettiest and best looking of the bunch. Sharon K, Phoenix, Arizona. Sharon, I got chills from your story. What a truly incredible tale, and again, you've hit a home run. Thank you for your story. It is amazing. Do you want to hear your story on the show? Then why not just send it in? All you have to do is go to ronsamazingstories.com, click on the story submission banner, and fill it out. If you don't want to write your whole story, that's okay. Just leave me your contact information, and I'll call you. I want to hear your story. You want to tell your story. So what do you say we do it? I want to thank everyone that sent in stories this week. You guys are the best. It's time now for some old-time radio commercials brought to you by Gladys Goodies. Good treats for your dog to eat. Men, have you ever used hair products? The Wild Root Company of Buffalo, New York, originally trademarked its Wild Root Hair Tonic in 1920. The product was marketed mainly to women to buy for their husbands. Early advertising claimed the hair tonic would cure dandruff, prevent balding, and produce thick, lustrous hair. It's still sold today, but now it's a cream and has no such claims other than it will keep your hair in place. How about that?
Get Wild Root Cream, oh, Charlie. It keeps your hair in trim. You see, it's non-alcoholic, Charlie. It's made with pseudolanolin. You better get Wild Root Cream Oil, Charlie. Start using it today. You'll find that you will have a tough time, Charlie. Keeping all those gals away. Hiya, Baldy. Get a bottle right away. Your druggist has it. A little goes a long, long way. You hear it screaming. Keeps you looking neat all day.
Do you like your beer? Well, one of the early beers was Lucky Lager. This American beer was created and distributed by the Pabst Brewing Company. It originally launched in 1934 by the San Francisco-based General Brewing Company. It grew to be one of the prominent beers of the West during the 1950s and 1960s.
Lucky beer, premium beer, Lucky premium beer, so lively, get lucky, swing to exciting beer flavor.
Finest ingredients, aged for flavor. That's Lucky Lager, flavor that's entertaining, enthusiastic, a very exciting beer.
Lucky beer, premium beer, Lucky premium beer.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that little trip into the past. I know I did. So, how did you like part 1 of our story last week? Are you ready for part 2? Second Variety is a classic science fiction tale written by Philip K. Dick. Last time I told you that it was suggested to me by a listener, but that I had lost the original email. Good news, I received this post from Mark Lopez. Hi Ron, I was the person who suggested the Philip K. Dick story, Second Variety. I'm truly honored that you listened to my suggestion, and I hope all your fans will enjoy this eerie story as much as I do. If any of your listeners don't care for the story, just tell them to be patient because they will be truly surprised by the ending. I always look forward to your next episode. Please keep up the good work. All the best. Sincerely, Mark Lopez. Well, Mark, I want to thank you for contacting me. I love to give credit where it is due, and Second Variety truly is an amazing story. It was first published in Space Science Fiction in May of 1953 and is read for us by Phil Shenevert. In Part 1, a Russian soldier is sent on a suicide mission to deliver a message to the Americans. He was killed by Allied-owned robots before he could deliver it. An American soldier was dispatched to check the body and recover the note. The message was a warning and a request for a high-level meeting. Major Hendricks was the closest official at hand and was sent out on his own. Along the way, he encountered many strange robots and a small child living in the ruins. The robots were of no concern to him because he had his tab which protected him. But who is this child and how has he managed to stay alive all by himself? Let's find out in part 2 of Second Variety.
A tall figure came out on the ridge above him, cloak flapping, gray-green, a Russian. Behind him a second soldier appeared, another Russian. Both lifted their guns, aiming. Hendricks froze. He opened his mouth. The soldiers were kneeling, sighting down the side of the slope. A third figure had joined them on the ridge top, a smaller figure in gray-green, a woman. She stood behind the other two. Hendricks found his voice. "Stop!" He waved at them frantically. The two Russians fired. Behind Hendricks there was a faint pop. Waves of heat lapped against him, throwing him to the ground. Ash tore at his face, grinding into his eyes and nose. Choking, he pulled himself to his knees. It was all a trap. He was finished. He had come to be killed like a steer. The soldiers and the woman were coming down the side of the ridge toward him, sliding down through the soft ash. Hendricks was numb. His head throbbed. Awkwardly, he got his rifle up and took aim. It weighed 1,000 tons. He could hardly hold it. His nose and cheeks stung. The air was full of the blast smell, a bitter, acrid stench. "Don't fire," the first Russian said in heavily accented English. The three of them came up to him, surrounding him. "Put down your rifle, Yank," the other said. Hendricks was dazed. Everything had happened so fast. He had been caught, and they had blasted the boy. He turned his head. David was gone. What remained of him was strewn across the ground. The three Russians studied him curiously. Hendricks sat, wiping blood from his nose, picking out bits of ash. He shook his head, trying to clear it. "Why did you do it?" he murmured thickly. "The boy." "Why?" One of the soldiers helped him roughly to his feet. He turned Hendricks around. "Look." Hendricks closed his eyes. "Look." The two Russians pulled him forward. "See, hurry up. There isn't much time to spare, Yank." Hendricks looked and gasped. "See, now do you understand?" From the remains of David, a metal wheel rolled. Relays, glinting metal, parts, wiring. One of the Russians kicked at the heap of remains. Parts popped out, rolling away. Wheels and springs and rods. A plastic section fell in, half charred. Hendricks bent shakily down. The front of the head had come off. He could make out the intricate brain, wires, and relays. Tiny tubes and switches, thousands of minute studs. "A robot," the soldier holding his arm said. "We watched it tagging you." "Tagging me?" "That's their way. They tag along with you into the bunker. That's how they get in." Hendricks blinked, dazed. "But—" "Come on." They led him toward the ridge. "We can't stay here. It isn't safe. There must be hundreds of them all around here." The three of them pulled him up the side of the ridge, sliding and slipping on the ash. The woman reached the top and stood waiting for them. "The forward command," Hendricks muttered. "I came to negotiate with the Soviet—" "There is no more forward command. They got in. We'll explain." They reached the top of the ridge. "We're all that's left, the three of us. The rest were down in the bunker." "This way, down this way." The woman unscrewed a lid, a gray manhole cover set in the ground. "Get in." Hendricks lowered himself. The two soldiers and the woman came behind him, following him down the ladder. The woman closed the lid after them, bolting it tightly into place. "Good thing we saw you," one of the two soldiers grunted. "It had tagged you about as far as it was going to." "Give me one of your cigarettes," the woman said. "I haven't had an American cigarette for weeks." Hendricks pushed the pack to her. She took a cigarette and passed the pack to the two soldiers. In the corner of the small room, the lamp gleamed fitfully. The room was low-ceilinged, cramped. The four of them sat around a small wood table. A few dirty dishes were stacked to one side. Behind a ragged curtain, a second room was partially visible. Hendricks saw the corner of a cot, some blankets, clothes hung on a hook. "We were here," the soldier beside him said. He took off his helmet, pushing his blond hair back. "I'm Corporal Rudy Maxer, Polish, impressed in the Soviet Army 2 years ago." He held out his hand. Hendricks hesitated and then shook. "Major Joseph Hendricks." "Klaus Epstein," the other soldier shook with him, a small dark man with thinning hair. Epstein plucked nervously at his ear. "Austrian, impressed God knows when. I don't remember. The three of us were here, Rudy and I, with Tasso." He indicated the woman. "That's how we escaped. All the rest were down in the bunker." And they got in?" Epstein lit a cigarette. "First, just one of them, the kind that tagged you. Then it let others in." Hendricks became alert. "The kind? Are there more than one kind?" "The little boy, David. David holding his teddy bear. That's variety 3. The most effective." "What are the other types?" Epstein reached into his coat. "Here." He tossed a packet of photographs onto the table, tied with a string. "Look for yourself." Hendricks untied the string. "You see," Rudy Maxer said, "that's why we wanted to talk terms. The Russians, I mean. We found out about a week ago. Found out that your claws were beginning to make up new designs on their own. New types of their own. Better types. Down in your underground factories behind our lines. You let them stamp themselves, repair themselves, make them more and more intricate. It's your fault this has happened." Hendricks examined the photos. They had been snapped hurriedly. They were blurred and indistinct. The first few showed David. David walking along a road by himself. David and another David. 3 Davids. All exactly alike. Each with a ragged teddy bear. All pathetic. "Look at the others," Tasso said. The next picture, taken at a great distance, showed a towering wounded soldier sitting by the side of a path. His arm in a sling, the stump of one leg extended, a crude crutch on his lap. Then 2 wounded soldiers, both the same, standing side by side. "That's variety 1, the wounded soldier." Klaus reached out and took the pictures. "You see, the claws were designed to get to human beings, to find them. Each kind was better than the last. They got farther, closer, past most of our defenses into our lines. But as long as they were merely machines, metal spheres with claws and horns and feelers, they could be picked off like any other object. They could be detected as lethal robots as soon as they were seen. Once we caught sight of them—" "Variety 1 subverted our whole north wing," Rudy said. "It was a long time before anyone caught on. Then it was too late. They came in, wounded soldiers knocking and begging to be let in, so we let them in. And as soon as they were in, they took over. We were watching out for machines." "At that time, it was thought there was only one type," Klaus Epstein said. "No one suspected there were other types. The pictures were flashed to us. When the runner was sent to you, we knew of just one type, variety 1. The big wounded soldier. We thought that was all." Your line fell to 2 Variety 3, David and his bear. That worked even better. Klaus smiled bitterly. Soldiers are suckers for children. We brought them in and tried to feed them. We found out the hard way what they were after. At least those who were in the bunker. The 3 of us were lucky, Rudy said. Klaus and I were visiting Tasso when it happened. This is her place. He waved a big hand around. This little cellar. We finished and climbed the ladder to start back. From the ridge, we saw. There they were, all around the bunker. Fighting was still going on. David and his bear. Hundreds of them. Klaus took the pictures. Klaus tied up the photographs again. And it's going on all along your line? Hendricks said. Yes. How about our lines? Without thinking, he touched the tab on his arm. Can they... They're not bothered by your radiation tabs. It makes no difference to them. Russian, American, Pole, German. It's all the same. They're doing what they were designed to do. Carrying out the original idea. They track down life wherever they find it. They go by warmth, Klaus said. That's the way you constructed them from the very start. Of course, those you designed were kept back by the radiation tabs you wear. Now they've got around that. These new varieties are lead-lined. What's the other variety? Hendricks asked. The David type, the wounded soldier. What's the other? We don't know. Klaus pointed up at the wall. On the wall were 2 metal plates, ragged at the edges. Hendricks got up and studied them. They were bent and dented. The one on the left came off a wounded soldier, Rudy said. We got one of them. It was going along toward our old bunker. We got it from the ridge, the same way we got the David tagging you. The plate was stamped I-V. Hendricks touched the other plate. And this came from the David type? Yes. The plate was stamped III-V. Klaus took a look at them, leaning over Hendricks's broad shoulder. You can see what we're up against. There's another type. Maybe it was abandoned. Maybe it didn't work. But there must be a second variety. There's 1 and 3. You were lucky, Rudy said. The David tagged you all the way here and never touched you. Probably thought you'd get into a bunker somewhere. 1 gets in and it's all over, Klaus said. They move fast. 1 lets all the rest in. They're inflexible. Machines with 1 purpose. They were built for only 1 thing. He rubbed sweat from his lip. We saw. They were silent. Let me have another cigarette, Yank, Tasso said. They are good. I almost forgot how they were. It was night. The sky was black. No stars were visible through the rolling clouds of ash. Klaus lifted the lid cautiously so that Hendricks could look out. Rudy pointed into the darkness. Over that way are the bunkers, where we used to be. Not over half a mile from us. It was just chance Klaus and I were not there when it happened. Weakness, saved by our lusts. All the rest must be dead, Klaus said in a low voice. It came quickly. This morning the Politburo reached their decision. They notified us, forward command. Our runner was sent out at once. We saw him start toward the direction of your lines. We covered him until he was out of sight. Alex Rodvisky, we both knew him. He disappeared about 6 o'clock. The sun had just come up. About noon, Klaus and I had an hour relief. We crept off away from the bunkers. No one was watching. We came here. There used to be a town here, a few houses, a street. This cellar was part of a big farmhouse. We knew Tasso would be here, hiding down in her little place. We had come here before. Others from the bunkers came here. Today happened to be our turn. So we were saved, Klaus said. Chance. It might have been others. We finished, and then we came up to the surface and started back along the ridge. That was when we saw them. The Davids. We understood right away. We had seen the photos of the first variety, the wounded soldier. Our commissar distributed them to us with an explanation. If we had gone another step, they would have seen us. As it was, we had to blast 2 Davids before we got back. There were hundreds of them, all around, like ants. V took pictures and slipped back here, bolting the lid tight. They're not so much when you catch them alone. We moved faster than they did. But they're inexorable. Not like living things. They came right at us, and we blasted them. Major Hendricks rested against the edge of the lid, adjusting his eyes to the darkness. Is it safe to have the lid up at all? If we're careful. How else can you operate your transmitter? Hendricks lifted the small belt transmitter slowly. He pressed it against his ear. The metal was cold and damp. He blew against the mic, raising up the short antenna. A faint hum sounded in his ear. That's true, I suppose, but he still hesitated. We'll pull you under if anything happens, Klaus said. Thanks. Hendricks waited a moment, resting the transmitter against his shoulder. Interesting, isn't it? What? This, the new types. The new varieties of claws. We're completely at their mercy, aren't we? By now, they've probably gotten into the UN lines, too. It makes me wonder if we're not seeing the beginning of a new species. The new species. Evolution, the race to come after man. Rudy grunted. There is no race after man. No? Why not? Maybe we're seeing it now, the end of human beings, the beginning of a new society. They're not a race. They're mechanical killers. You made them to destroy. That's all they can do. They're machines with a job. So it seems now, but how about later on, after the war is over? Maybe when there aren't any humans to destroy, their real potentialities will begin to show. You talk as if they were alive. Aren't they? There was silence. They're machines, Rudy said. They look like people, but they're machines. Use your transmitter, Major, Klaus said. We can't stay up here forever. Holding the transmitter tightly, Hendricks called the code of the command bunker. He waited, listening. No response. Only silence. He checked the leads carefully. Everything was in place. Scott, he said into the mic, can you hear me? Silence. He raised the gain up full and tried again. Only static. I don't get anything. They may hear me, but they may not want to answer. Tell them it's an emergency. They'll think I'm being forced to call. Under your direction. He tried again, outlining briefly what he had learned, but still the phone was silent, except for the faint static. Radiation pools killed most transmission, Klaus said after a while. Maybe that's it. Hendricks shut the transmitter up. No use, no answer. Radiation pools? Maybe. Or they heard me but won't answer. Frankly, that's what I would do if a runner tried to call from the Soviet lines. They have no reason to believe such a story. They may hear everything I say, or maybe it's too late. Hendricks nodded. We'd better get the lid down, Rudy said nervously. We don't want to take unnecessary chances. They climbed slowly back down the tunnel. Klaus bolted the lid carefully into place. They descended into the kitchen. The air was heavy and close around them. Could they work that fast? Hendricks said. I left the bunker this noon, 10 hours ago. How could they move so quickly? It doesn't take them long. Not after the first ones get in. It goes wild. You know what the little claws can do. Even one of these is beyond belief. Razors each finger. Maniacal. All right. Hendricks moved away impatiently. He stood with his back to them. What's the matter? Rudy said. The moon base. God, if they've gotten there... The moon base? Hendricks turned around. They couldn't have got to the moon base. How could they get there? It isn't possible. I can't believe it. What is this moon base? We've heard rumors, but nothing definite. What is the actual situation? You seem concerned. We're supplied from the moon. The governments are there under the lunar surface. All our people and industries, that's what keeps us going. If they should find some way of getting off Terra onto the moon... It only takes one of them. Once the first gets in, it admits the others, hundreds of them, all alike. You should have seen them. Identical, like ants. Perfect socialism, Tasso said. The ideal of the communist state. All citizens interchangeable. Klaus grunted angrily. That's enough. Well, what next? Hendricks paced back and forth around the small room. The air was full of smells of food and perspiration. The others watched him. Presently, Tasso pushed through the curtain into the other room. I am going to take a nap. The curtain closed behind her. Rudy and Klaus sat down at the table, still watching Hendricks. It's up to you, Klaus said. We don't know your situation. Hendricks nodded. It's a problem. Rudy drank some coffee, filling his cup from a rusty pot. We're safe here for a while, but we can't stay here forever. Not enough food or supplies. But if we go outside... If we go outside, they'll get us. Or probably they'll get us. We couldn't go very far. How far is your command bunker, Major? 3 or 4 miles. We might make it. The 4 of us. 4 of us could watch all sides. They couldn't slip up behind us and start tagging us. We have 3 rifles, 3 blast rifles. Tasso can have my pistol. Rudy tapped his belt. In the Soviet Army, we didn't have shoes always, but we had guns. With all 4 of us armed, one of us might get to your command bunker. Preferably you, Major. What if they're already there? Klaus said. Rudy shrugged. Well, then we come back here. Hendricks stopped pacing. What do you think the chances are they're already in the American lines? Hard to say. Fairly good. They're organized. They know exactly what they're doing. Once they start, they go like a horde of locusts. They have to keep moving and fast. It's secrecy and speed they depend on. Surprise. They push their way in before anyone has any idea. I see, Hendricks murmured. From the other room, Tasso stirred. Major? Hendricks pushed the curtain back. What? Tasso looked up at him lazily from the cot. Have you any more American cigarettes left? Hendricks went into the room and sat down across from her on a wood stool. He felt his pockets. No, all gone. Too bad. What nationality are you? Hendricks asked after a while. Russian. How did you get here? Here? This used to be France. This was part of Normandy. Did you come with the Soviet Army? Why? Just curious. He studied her. She had taken off her coat, tossing it over the end of the cot. She was young, about 20, slim. Her long hair stretched out over the pillow. She was staring at him silently, her eyes dark and large. What's on your mind? Tasso said. Nothing. How old are you? 18. She continued to watch him, unblinking, her arms behind her head. She had on Russian army pants and shirt, gray-green, thick leather belt with counter and cartridges, medicine kit. You're in the Soviet Army? No. Where did you get the uniform? She shrugged. It was given to me, she told him. How old were you when you came here? 16? That young? Her eyes narrowed. What do you mean? Hendricks rubbed his jaw. Your life would have been a lot different if there had been no war. 16. You came here at 16 to live this way. I had to survive. I'm not moralizing. Your life would have been different, too, Tasso murmured. She reached down and unfastened one of her boots. She kicked the boot off onto the floor. Major, do you want to go in the other room? I'm sleepy. It's going to be a problem, the four of us here. It's going to be hard to live in these quarters. Are there just the 2 rooms? Yes. How big was the cellar originally? Was it larger than this? Are there other rooms filled up with debris? We might be able to open one of them. Perhaps. I really don't know. Tasso loosened her belt. She made herself comfortable on the cot, unbuttoning her shirt. You're sure you have no more cigarettes? I only had the 1 pack. Too bad. Maybe if we get back to your bunker we can find some. The other boot fell. Tasso reached up for the light cord. Good night. You're going to sleep? That's right. The room plunged into darkness. Hendricks got up and made his way past the curtain into the kitchen. And stopped, rigid. Rudy stood against the wall, his face white and gleaming. His mouth opened and closed, but no sounds came. Klaus stood in front of him, the muzzle of his pistol in Rudy's stomach. Neither of them moved. Klaus, his hand tight around his gun, his features set. Rudy, pale and silent, spread-eagled against the wall. What? Hendricks muttered, but Klaus cut him off. Be quiet, Major. Come over here. Your gun. Get out your gun. Hendricks drew his pistol. What is it? Cover him. Klaus motioned him forward. Beside me. Hurry. Rudy moved a little, lowering his arms. He turned to Hendricks, licking his lips. The whites of his eyes shone wildly. Sweat dripped from his forehead down his cheeks. He fixed his gaze on Hendricks. Major, he's gone insane. Stop him. Rudy's voice was thin and hoarse, almost inaudible. What's going on? Hendricks demanded. Without lowering his pistol, Klaus answered, Major, remember our discussion, the 3 varieties. We knew about 1 and 3, but we didn't know about 2. At least we didn't know before. Klaus's fingers tightened around the gun butt. We didn't know before, but we know now. He pressed the trigger. A burst of white heat rolled out of the gun, licking around Rudy. Major, this is the 2nd variety. Tasso swept the curtain aside. Klaus, what did you do? Klaus turned from the charred form, gradually sinking down the wall onto the floor. The 2nd variety, Tasso. Now we know. We have all 3 types identified. The danger is less. Tasso stared past him at the remains of Rudy, at the blackened, smoldering fragments and bits of cloth. You killed him. Him? It you mean? I was watching. I had a feeling, but I wasn't sure. At least I wasn't sure before. But this evening I was certain. Klaus rubbed his pistol butt nervously. We're lucky. Don't you understand? Another hour, and it might... You were certain? Tasso pushed past him and bent down over the steaming remains on the floor. Her face became hard. Major, see for yourself. Bones, flesh. Hendricks bent down beside her. The remains were human remains. Seared flesh, charred bone fragments, part of a skull. Ligaments, viscera, blood. Blood forming a pool against the wall. No wheels, Tasso said calmly. She straightened up. No wheels, no parts, no relays, not a claw. Not the 2nd variety. She folded her arms. You're going to have to be able to explain this. Klaus sat down at the table. All the color drained suddenly from his face. He put his head in his hands and rocked back and forth. "Snap out of it." Tasso's fingers closed over his shoulder. "Why did you do it? Why did you kill him?" He was frightened, Hendricks said. "All this, the whole thing building up around us? Maybe." "What then? What do you think?" "I think he may have had a reason for killing Rudy. A good reason." "What reason?" "Maybe Rudy learned something." Hendricks studied her bleak face. "About what?" he asked. "About him. About Klaus."
Well, there you have part 2. We'll continue next week with part 3 of Second Variety by Philip K. Dick. Again, I want to thank Mark Lopez for suggesting this remarkable tale. Oh my gosh, that's another podcast. I want to thank Herman Weaver, Noah Simpson, Sharon K, and Mark Lopez for their contributions to the show this time. Without you, we don't have a show. If you want to follow the podcast or the blog, just head to ronsamazingstories.com. There you'll find all the links you'll need. We are on Twitter, Facebook, iTunes, TuneIn, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and so many other services. Please do pick one and leave reviews and feedback about the show. It really does help us to grow. Thank you for listening, and I hope you come again to find out what are Ron's Amazing Stories.
All of the vintage audio used in the podcast is believed to be in the public domain. Ron's Amazing Stories does not own the rights to any of the old-time radio used here. If you hold the rights to any of the shows played, please contact us immediately at ronsamazingstories.com.